Welcome to today's session, the Food Desert Supermarket Financing Gap Tax Credit Program webinar. We'll be sharing lots of information about this program today, so thank you again for joining us. To get started with the actual content of today's section, I am going to switch things over to Giancarlo Leonardo, our Senior Program Officer of Real Estate Programs. Giancarlo?
Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Happy to be here to describe the Food Desert Relief Financing Gap Tax Credit. I'm going to get right into it and keep us moving. In addition to this webinar, as Caitlin mentioned, the NJEDA website has additional information about this program. You can see the link on the screen. This slide presentation will also be available for those of you who are looking for it on the website. There's also a recording of the operating gap tax credit that was available, that was done earlier this year. That is also posted on the website for this program, and you can review that as well. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Brian Todd. He's the Senior Advisor for Food Desert Relief, and Brian's going to go over some of the Food Desert Relief work that the NJEDA is undertaking. Brian?
Thank you, Giancarlo, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. All of this, the tax credit programs come out of the Food Desert Relief Act, which was part of the New Jersey Economic Recovery Act of 2020, which Governor Murphy signed into law back in January of 2021. The purpose of it was essentially, the main function was to facilitate development, construction, of sustainable operations of new or redeveloped supermarkets. And then in addition, to strengthen existing community assets by equipping them with necessary equipment or infrastructure to provide healthier food options, and at the same time help retailers and consumers respond to the shift to e-commerce, including the shift for online and sales of food products through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, and the Women, Infants, and Children program. And also to look at innovative and new solutions to alleviate food insecurity. As part of this, as you will realize, we were originally tasked with coming up with 50 food deserts in the state of New Jersey. This is the first 25, as you can see, and that process took quite some time, as we did used a very intensive methodology that we believe is probably one of the most substantial ever used for this purpose. It's very New Jersey centric, much more involved than even the USDA's designation of food deserts. On this list, you'll see many of the major cities that one would think would be in there, but as well as several smaller ones because of the methodology that we used. The ones at the top of the list, using our official term of food deserty, they are the most food deserty, the ones at the beginning. And on there, you will see in the top 10 places like Passaic, Newark, Salem, Atlantic City, Camden, which again, are widely known to be food deserts in many cases. Just one note, you will see the little asterisk next to some locations. That is the indication that that entire community or city is a food desert. For most of the others, it's only portions of those, such as when you look at Newark South or Passaic or Trenton East, it's only a portion of those areas, not the entire, the entire area. Next slide. We will see these are the 26 through 50. As you go through, you will see the population varies greatly from the major cities all the way down to someplace like Highbridge, which has just 1,200 people, but is still fell within our methodology to determine that it was a food desert. Next slide. And then we'll just touch on some of the features of the program as Giancarlo gets into much more detail as we talk about the financing gap application. But basically, the Food Desert Relief Supermarket Tax Credits is 2 tax credits. As Giancarlo mentioned, the operating tax credit, we had a webinar earlier this year, which you can see online. This one will talk more about the financing gap, but in both cases, they were put into place for the development and operation of new supermarkets and rehabilitated supermarkets in those designated food desert communities. Applications will be on a rolling basis through 2027. Again, it's to bolster access to nutritious foods, particularly for SNAP and WIC eligible New Jerseyans. We're looking to encourage the long-term and longevity of supermarkets in these areas after the tax credits end. Thus, there will be requirements to meet the requirements of the program even after the initial eligibility period ends. The program is capped at $240 million in tax credits over 7 years. As part of our program, we also have the option to sell tax credits to fully fund other programs. We had our first auction of these tax credits already, where we brought in $15 million, leaving us $225 million. We're in the process of launching a new tax credit program, a new tax credit auction in the near future. So please, if you're interested on that front of it, look forward for more information about that on our website. Getting into the supermarket financing gap tax credit, the awards will account for up to 20 to 40% of project costs, capped at whatever that project financing gap is. And for the initial operating cost tax credit, it's up to 50 to 100% of operating costs, capped at the operating shortfall. Again, more details about that are on our website and in the prior webinar. For those who will be looking to receive both, will be filing for both tax credits. They must be reviewed and approved at the same time, not that they have to be submitted at exactly the same moment, but because one involving development and the other involving operating, much of the information is similar, and we will have to make sure it matched. So if you are doing both, please be sure that the information matches as you submit them. As far as who is eligible, again, first or second new supermarket located in a food desert community has to be that the project is not economically feasible without the tax credit award. As again, getting into the longevity of supermarkets, the project must be open for 7 years and economically and commercially viable by the 7th year, evidenced by a feasibility study. Costs must be reasonable and in line with industry standards. Of course, there has to be a financing gap or initial operating cost shortfall has to exist. For projects requiring construction or equipment installation, prevailing wage and affirmative action requirements will be in place. Getting back to SNAP and WIC, applicants will have to commit that the supermarket will accept SNAP and WIC. Applicants must also maintain that 10% of the retail spaces dedicated to fresh and frozen produce, and that they will hold an annual listening session each year, bringing in consumers to get feedback on the store. And for the financing gap tax credit only, except for demolition and site remediation, construction cannot have started. Regarding the first and second supermarket, again, up to 2 in each food desert can be approved. The minimum size of the store would be 16,000 square feet, with 80% occupied by food and food-related products. Again, construction must not have started or significant rehabilitation after January 7th, 2021. If rehabilitating, the rehab must include repair and replacement of 2 major systems, impact 75% of the square footage, and costs must exceed 60% of the fair market value after the rehab. The designation of the first and second will be based on the date of approval of the tax credits, not on the date of construction or rehabilitation began or the date of application. And stores must continue to meet the milestones set by the authority in order to retain their designations. Looking at getting back to the eligibility and commitment period for the financing gap tax credit, the eligibility period will be 4 years, and then followed by a 3-year commitment period coming up to 7. For the initial operating cost tax credit, the eligibility period will be 3 years, followed by a 4-year commitment period. Again, the tax credit for financing will be issued over those 4 years and the operating costs over the 3 years. Both credits will begin when the supermarket opens. And again, even though the eligibility period ends, the supermarket must continue to meet all of those requirements, at least until it's been open for 7 years. And now I'll turn it back over to Giancarlo, who will go into much more detail about the financing gap tax credit.
Thanks, Brian. But before I do go into the financing gap tax credit, I just want to mention again the initial operating cost tax credit. As Brian mentioned, we did a webinar on this program, on this part of the tax credit in January 2024. The webinar recording is on the product website at the EDA, and applications will be reviewed together if you are applying for both the initial operating tax credit and the financing gap tax credit. If you do have questions, and we'll have this email address up several times over the course of this presentation, but please email fooddesertrelief@njeda.gov, and someone on our team will reach back out to you with an answer. I'm going to go into the financing gap tax credit a little bit more detail this time. So applicants must develop and open a supermarket or grocery store for business if you're applying for this tax credit. The applicant must contribute a minimum of 20% of the total development cost as equity. An applicant must make all good faith efforts to raise additional capital. The award amount is based on a calculation involving project financing gap, reasonable and appropriate rate of return, and other factors. To receive both tax credits, again, both applications must be reviewed and approved at the same time and must contain matching financial information. In order to size the award that will be given, and I will go to a chart momentarily to show additional information on that, an agreement between the owner or operator of a supermarket or grocery store and one or more labor organizations is required. Participating labor organization and its members agree to refrain from picketing, work stoppages, boycotts, and other economic interferences. Business agrees to maintain a neutral posture towards unionizing. A labor harmony agreement is voluntary unless the state has a proprietary interest in the project. Applicants for the financing gap tax credit will be eligible for the maximum cap on their tax credit amount only if they require a labor harmony agreement for the supermarket operator. A collective bargaining agreement will be accepted in lieu of a labor harmony agreement. So what that means in terms of dollars is the award size is calculated as the lower of the project financing gap, or a cap as follows. If you're the first supermarket in a food desert community and you have a labor harmony agreement, you're eligible for 40% of project costs. If you do not have a labor harmony agreement and you're the first supermarket in a food desert community, you get 30%. You're eligible for up to 30% of project costs. If you're the second supermarket in a food desert community, 20% of total project costs are eligible if you have a labor harmony agreement, and only 15% are eligible if you do not have a labor harmony agreement. You notice that it's half. So the first supermarket in receives the higher tax credit. The second supermarket in gets half of that, depending on whether you have a labor harmony agreement or not. It's 40% and 20%, or 30% and 15%. There's a reasonable and appropriate rate of return that will be determined at board approval. As we go through your application, at project certification, NJEDA will determine if the actual financing is consistent with what was submitted. The award may be reduced if the actual financing makes the financing gap smaller than was previously calculated. The EDA will reevaluate project returns in two scenarios. Before the final year of eligibility, if the returns exceed the board-approved level by more than 15%, the amount issued in the final year of eligibility will be reduced by 20% of the excess. If the applicant sells, leases, or subleases the store, if returns exceed the board-approved level by more than 15%, the applicant shall pay to the state 20% of the excess. So here's a little bit about the fees. So without modifications or transfer, projects that are less than $10 million in total project cost would be $30,000 application fee. Projects that are greater than 10 million would be $110,000 in application fee. And you see there the different fees associated with minor and major modifications or transfers related to the project. Okay, now I'm going to walk you through the application, and I am not going to go through every page of the application. Many of you on this webinar and those watching this webinar will are already familiar with the NJEDA common application, but we are going to focus on some of the key pages that you will need to fill out as you're applying for the financing gap tax credit. So at the NJEDA Application Center sign-in page, if you are using this for the first time, you'll click on the Register button on the top of the page and create an account. If you are signing in because you've already applied, you can go through, submit your username and password. If you've forgotten your password, you can just click Forgot Your Password, and you'll be prompted to do that. How to register. So enter your email, username, can be the same as your email, and a password. The passwords must contain characters for at least 3 of the following 4 classes, uppercase, lowercase, digit, or a non-alphanumeric or special character. Once the information is filled in, you can click register, and please make sure that you write down your username and password. That is a common issue. If your email is recognized by the application portal, you'll be able to click in and register. You'll receive the pop-up, indicates your email address is already recognized in the system. If that's the case, click OK, and you will have an invitation code sent to you. To redeem an invitation code, click Send Invitation. Then you will check your email. It may be in your junk or spam, so please check. It will come from CRM No Reply. That is our system here at the EDA. You will click on that link, and it will take you to the portal to register and redeem. And then you will fill in information as requested to complete the process. This will be where your username and password will be needed to access the application portal. You can set up an application profile. This makes things a little easier as you go through and submit your application. You click register, you enter your information, first name, last name, phone number. Those are required fields. Confirm your email address is correct. This will be the way that the EDA contacts you. So whoever the applicant is, whoever's filling out the application on behalf of your entity, have that person be the contact. And then click update on the bottom. That will be the way to save those changes. You'll get an email confirmation saying that your email is complete, that your application is, you're confirming your information is complete here. You must confirm your email address in order to move forward. If you do have trouble logging into the portal and you need help, there are 2 ways to reach out. One is through our customer care line, and you see the phone number listed on the screen. The other is via email to our customer care team at customercare@njeda.gov. So now you're in the application center. You see the various programs that the NJEDA has available. I believe this is still where we are. We are right at the bottom of the list of the NJEDA's programs. For those who may not be aware, the EDA has numerous programs that are available either right now or in different rounds. The Food Desert program is currently located at the bottom of this list, so please scroll down and look for Food Desert. When you go to start an application, you will see the write-up that you see on the left side of your screen. This gives a little bit of overall information about a welcome for the program, different eligibility information, as well as some high-level information about who should be applying for which tax credit, because it matters whether you're the operator or the developer, which one you will apply for. Today we are talking about the supermarket financing gap tax credit. So you will click on the top one here, supermarket financing gap tax credit, and click create on the right side of the application. Now, the create button is on the right, and you will be able to start your application. So this is several pages into the application, but again, I'm just highlighting several of the pages that are most relevant to those on the webinar today. The applicant organization, please provide information about the company that is applying for assistance. If you are applying for the financing gap tax credit, you are applying as the developer of the property or the entity that is in control of the property that is being turned into a grocery store or supermarket. So this is broken up here into 3 pages, but you'll see the different information that is required, the organization name, if you have a doing business as, a DBA, if you have a certificate for that alternate name, your entity type. There's drop downs for several of these, the date that your organization was established, and the mailing address for the applicant. Continuing on the applicant information page, where were you incorporated, or where was the applicant, where's the formation information from, country and state. We're assuming most of these organizations were incorporated here in the United States, but that may not always be the case. So please, again, be aware of the drop-down that's available, the type of organization, your formation documents, your tax ID number, your employee identification number, as well as a phone, website, and a short paragraph describing the applicant and your entity. We do ask for a high-level description. That's 2 or 3 short paragraphs. We don't need a ton of information, but we do ask you to put a short paragraph describing who you are, what you do, your mission statement, the markets that you serve, and the customer base that you serve, and any other information about your business that the EDA needs to better understand your application. There, you also are required to submit your NICS code as your NAICS code. So there is a search bar for those of you who are doing this regularly. You can look at your most recent business tax filing. You should have that on there. You will also need to upload a New Jersey tax clearance certificate. Again, you need to request that from the state of New Jersey and upload it. So that may be something that you need to do with a little bit of prep work. So we'd encourage you to get that before you're starting your application and moving through. There are different fields here. If you are involved in any religious activity or religiously affiliated, there would be a form to fill out and upload. If that is relevant to you, please do that. If not, you can click no on this. Is the applicant involved in religious activities or religiously affiliated? Okay, additional applicant organization details. Again, there will be yes or no versions on this. This section, we're collecting information about the company that is applying for assistance. We're focusing on the primary applicant only. We may collect information on affiliates, parent companies, holding companies, or other in subsequent sections, and that is the case. So please upload information about where your headquarters is, if you are an affiliate, or if you are not, provide a description, upload an organizational chart, any other additional information about the corporate structure of your organization that would be relevant to this application. In terms of ownership, the ownership of the property, ownership of the company, ownership of the company. If there's any individual or entity with 10% or greater ownership of the company, would have to fill out additional information, and there would be a way to create records for each individual with greater than 10% ownership. If you click yes, there will be the drop down would allow you to add that information. If the answer is no, you click no, and you'll be able to move right on to the next page. For affiliates, and we recognize that this may be the case for people applying to the financing gap tax credit, there's a definition, the EDA approved definition of affiliate here. It's an entity that directly or indirectly controls, is under common control with, or is controlled by the applicant. So that's something that may be relevant here. So if that applies to you, again, you would have to either click yes or no. If yes, the the option comes up to add affiliate and to then create a record for that affiliate. Here's what that pop-up would look like. Again, you do the affiliate type, there's a drop-down, the name, DBA, percent ownership, what have you. And again, you'd go through all of this information to fill out in order to submit the application. We'd want, again, a short paragraph describing the affiliate and its relationship. If that affiliate has had any previous relationship with the AEDA, if they've gotten any assistance, or if they are religiously affiliated, there will be drop downs, again, similar to what you've previously done for the applicant. Some applicants may choose to have a co-applicant. So this may be a nonprofit or another partner that is working with you on the application. You do not have to have a co-applicant, but if you do, this would be relevant. So if the answer is no here, you click no and you just move on. If the answer is yes, you would click create yes and then create, and then you would be able to fill out information on that. So just for the benefit of everybody on the call, a co-applicant is a nonprofit for tax-exempt taxation purposes under the 501c3 of the IRS code. This co-applicant may contribute capital, real property, or services related to the project that directly affect and serve the anticipated residents, tenants, or customers of the rehabilitation or new construction project, or enters into a participation agreement with a developer that specifies they have a role in the rehab or new construction project. Again, if that is the case, you would be required to fill in documentation. There is required documentation if you have a co-applicant. You need to have a participation agreement, formation documents, tax clearance, religious affiliation form if that's applicable, any permits or approvals that co-applicant would bring along or is relevant to that co-applicant, a legal questionnaire, an organizational chart, and other materials. If you are filling that out, please make sure you save the co-applicant before moving on to the next page. If you do have more than one co-applicant, you would repeat the process with the plus create button on the top right. Now we'll get into the specific project information. In this section, we're looking for general information regarding the project. You may name the project. We want a short description, the scope of the proposed project, which you're seeking the credits for, discuss the targeted customers, anticipated demand in the surrounding food desert community, upload any additional information about that here, and then we get into the specifics on the location of the project which you are applying. You put the application, the project address, again, city, state, zip, block and lot, size of the lot, square footage wise, and then you need to put in the specific food desert that you are applying for. And for those who are maybe not familiar, the EDA food desert team has worked very hard to create a mapping tool, which you see here in blue on the screen. You can click that link and it will bring you to a map that highlights the different food desert areas that Brian mentioned earlier. Please make sure that your project address is within one of those food desert communities. If it is not, you may not be eligible. So you would select through this dropdown which one you are in. You would again select the name of the food desert, and we ask you to take a screenshot with that mapping tool of the address with where it is within the food desert and upload that here. We do ask that the applicant has a form of site control, whether it's they're currently the owner or maybe there's a long-term lease, but that relationship to the property needs to be submitted. So again, you'll follow the information here. If the applicant is not the legal owner, please put the information about that legal owner on this page. If you are working to acquire the property, which is a possibility, you would then select yes here. upload your letter of intent or other documentation evidencing site control or path to site control. That would be important for the EDA to understand as it reviews your application. We're also asking for additional information about projected number of permanent employees, full-time and part-time, at the supermarket or grocery store, what the total square footage is, and again, a minimum of 16,000 square feet is required to be eligible. Hopefully your store is larger than that, but 16,000 is a minimum threshold for this. As Brian mentioned, at least 80% of the square footage of the grocery store or supermarket needs to be occupied by food or food-related products. We'd ask you to submit a layout of the space, floor plan or planogram showing the square footage of the retail space, space for food and related products, space for fresh and or frozen fruit and vegetables, and any space within the supermarket or grocery store that will be subleased or licensed to other tenants. You also do need to provide a letter evidencing support from the governing body, the municipality or the municipalities if you're in multiple in which the project is located, and that is a required field. Building eligibility for financing gap. You would need to decide whether this is a new construction or rehabilitation, which meets the definition. And as mentioned, rehabilitation on at least 75% of the square footage after January 7th, 2021 to be considered for rehabilitation. If it is a new construction of a building, it would have to have occurred after January 7th, 2021. If you are doing any demolition or site remediation, that work may have been able to start, but if not, if you are not doing any of that work, no other work may have started in order to be eligible. You need to add the construction date and again, describe any improvements to the site that are anticipated. Permits and approvals are another required bit of information here that we will look for. The applicant may be associated with or may need to have permits from either the Department of Labor and Workforce Development, the NJEDA, or the New Jersey Department of Treasury, depending on what your project is, obligations and responsibilities. If the answer is no, you'll have to proceed to the next page. If the answer is yes, you can create a record for each permit. So you would click create and a drop-down would come up on the bottom here, and you'd be able to type in the name of the permit, the issuing department, type, the approval number, the status, what have you. We would need that if that is relevant to you. Again, this is a little bit more. And again, the issuing department, entity name that received the permit or approval, the EIN of the applicant, the permit number, status of the status, a permit or approval, and the description of the permit, approval, obligation, or responsibilities that come with that permit or approval. For the operator, and again, we are in the financing gap, but we do need information relevant to the operator. Will the applicant also be the operator of the new supermarket or grocery store? This could be a yes or a no. If yes, you'll be filling out more information. If the answer is no, there is some additional information that is required as well. Indicate whether the applicant intends to apply for the operating tax credit or not. And again, we are reviewing these at the same time. So both applicants must have matching financial data and they will be reviewed and approved together. So if you are applying for both, we do need to know that, and you would need to indicate that here, because depending on the order of which you submit, we would need to know that. So if the answer is no on being the operator of the store, we do need an operator agreement and any commitments that were here, and there's additional information here. I will not read through all of that. The labor harmony agreement, again, looking to get the higher caps on whether you're the first or second supermarket in the food desert community. Uploading that would be maybe beneficial depending on how you are proceeding with your application. And that would be an upload field as well. Okay, capital investments and project costs. We do ask you to download a project worksheet, cost worksheet, complete it, and upload a finalized copy in Excel. The template includes explanations of which cost categories are and are not eligible. So please be mindful of that as you're filling this out. And again, I would maybe have that open and then use that to fill out some of the other relevant fields, such as total project cost. The value must match cell F97 in the worksheet. So it even tells you exactly where to look. Please do that. And if any costs have been incurred prior to application, you'll be asked for additional information, which you'll see here on the next slide. And again, these are some of the different things, and whether it's building acquisition, land acquisition, remediation, demolition, site prep, soft costs, or other, depending on which you select, or if you select multiple, you'll be asked to provide additional information here. Okay, in terms of project costs, again, this is more of what this looks like. We'll ask for additional information. You'll need to upload supporting documentation depending on what you're submitting. So again, depending on what costs you may have already incurred, please be ready with the supporting documentation that you'll need to upload. Okay, the project economics pages are key pages for us, and we want to make sure that you are paying attention to this as well. You will need to create a sources and uses for this project, and we do have a template that we ask that you download, complete, and re-upload. And again, the sources and uses template must be completed by the applicant whose property is being developed or redeveloped as a supermarket or grocery store. If you are the owner and operator, this will be easy because you are doing both sides of this transaction. If you are the owner of the property, but you have a separate operator, we recommend that you work with the operator to make sure that this information is correct. Funding source documentation, if you are using other sources of funding, which we assume that you will, especially because a minimum of 20% equity is required, we do ask that you submit documentation, and we have a little explanation here depending on whether you're using debt, grant, subsidies, tax credits, or equity, what would be required depending on which source you are using. If the project is part of a larger development, so whether you're doing a larger mixed-use development, redevelopment, rehab, or maybe this is a larger plaza type development, there will be additional information, and I'll get to that momentarily. There is also a feasibility study component that's required, and you'll see the information up here. Please upload a copy of a market and/or feasibility study for the project by an independent third party. The study must include the third party's position regarding the marketability and underwriting of the revenue and expense components of the proposed project for the eligibility period. And there's some specifics that the study must be dated within 12 months of the application and must include some of the following. So for those of you who maybe have a study, please make sure that your study includes these things. If you have not yet done a study, but you're looking to work with a firm, these are some of the things that would be required and would need to be uploaded as well. So in terms of information about the larger project, if this is a larger mixed use or plaza development type, we do ask that you put additional information about that development in here. So we'd ask for a 1 to 3 paragraph description talking about the broader project of which the supermarket is a part. Please include the total capital investment, status of financing, any other subsidies or commitments that might be relevant to this project. That sources and uses budget and pro forma for the larger facility would need to be uploaded as well, including operating assumptions and a return analysis. Whether the returns are levered or unlevered, please mark that, whether they are levered or unlevered. Again, a minimum of 20% equity is required. So we would need additional information about different sources if you are needing that. So that would be uploaded on this page as well. The pro forma, and we assume that everyone here is able to work with someone to have this created. but upload a project pro forma providing comprehensive project level financial information. At a minimum, it should include revenue, expense, cash flow, rental rates, vacancy rates, internal rate of return, as well as information carrying that through the projected project duration, how the EDA assistant impacts that project, and the cap rate. If it's part of a larger project, include rental rates and vacancy rates and other fees for other parts of the development. And again, this should reflect a minimum of 7 years of operation following opening of the store and assume an exit for year 8 for the purposes of calculating an IRR. The pro forma should indicate whether the returns are levered or unlevered. We do ask that you certify that additional capital for the proposed supermarket cannot be raised from other sources on a non-recourse basis after making all good faith efforts to raise additional capital. Construction and scheduling. So please upload an anticipated project schedule. That's a required field. If the project is in an area in need of redevelopment, please upload any redevelopment agreement or plan that's relevant to this project. If you have any professionals on the job already, please say yes or no, and if so, you'll be asked to upload some information on those professionals. We're specifically looking for information on architects, construction managers, and general contractors. And again, on the right side, you'll see the type of information that we'll be requesting. There are some certifications about prevailing wage and affirmative action requirements, and this is true for all EDA funding. So please read the requirements, and you'd have to acknowledge them before moving forward. There is also an upload regarding contractor registration that needs to be certified before you move forward. And some additional certifications, some of which Brian mentioned earlier, to be eligible for the tax credit, that the project will be accepting SNAP, WIC, other assistance programs, that the project does not have additional capital raised from other sources on a non-recourse basis, acknowledging that the project must hold at least one public listening session annually, and acknowledging that the store must maintain at least 10% of retail space dedicated to fresh and or frozen fruits and vegetables. Again, the application fee, which I mentioned earlier, there are two options: credit card or mailing a check. And depending on which you do, you select that here. If you're doing a credit card, you'll receive an email after you submit your application. If you are paying via check, the information is here on the page where you would send that to. You'll receive a confirmation code, and please keep that for your records as you wait for the EDA. You'll be required to do an electronic signature and submit that before you are completed. And just as a note, and this has been on the last several slides on the bottom, the EDA will not begin a review of your application until the application fee has been received. So if you've submitted your application but you have not yet paid your fee, please do not ask us what the status of your application is. We are waiting for your payment. You will receive a confirmation page that you are submitted. Please download this, please save this. You will see a CAP number here, which is the record for your application. Please save that and reference that in any email communication that you may have with the EDA about the status of your application or any questions that you may have. If the EDA has any follow-up questions for you, the applicant, we will reference the CAP number as well. And that is our presentation today. I know there's been some questions that have come in. Caitlin, I'll pass it back to you for a second.
I think all of the questions have been answered at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think you're good to go.
Okay, great. And so thanks everybody for joining us. And again, if you have any questions, please email us at at fooddesertrelief@njeda.gov. We're happy to take your questions, and best of luck as you work through these applications. Thank you.
Thank you.